So it was that I arrived back in England on demobilisation leave in the late spring of 1946, and once again stepped through the big iron gates of Beanside and entered the house. It was cold and seemed to have a musty smell of neglect. I went upstairs and looked in all the rooms. The curtains were half drawn in my mother's room, and I saw a very small white head resting on the pillow and what seemed a strangely small shape beneath the bedclothes. I quietly retraced my steps and walked down the old familiar driveway with all the once neatly mown verges and were now badly overgrown. The beautiful croquet lawn was now just a field. I stopped at the empty dog pen, which had once housed our two chocolate-coated Labradors, and realised that nature had practically reclaimed everything. I now saw my father walking slowly up the drive towards me. He too seemed smaller, and he didn't recognise me. His first words were, "Dick, my boy." "No, Dad, it's Vernon. The garden's a mess. I can't do much myself now." I said it didn't matter. "And the damn bullfinches are eating all the apple buds." "What a pity," I said. "The boys are all away at the war, you know." "Yes, Dad." He was now in his 90s, so I suppose this unexpected deterioration should not have been a surprise to me, but I was shocked and very sad. I recalled our last sporting trip together in the punt. I was on a 48-hour leave from North Weald on a lovely June day. The mayfly was up in abundance, and I persuaded him to bring out his old 12-foot green heart fly rod and have a go. "I can't see well enough now, my boy." "Never mind that, I'll tell you when to strike." The river was still full of life and manfully struggling on in spite of the low water level and the beginnings of nitrogen pollution. I knew exactly where to find a few fish gorging themselves on those fat yellow lady mayflies. It was around midday, and even as I pushed the punt off from the landing stage, I spotted fish feeding 100 yards upstream, exactly where they had always been, in a narrow 3-foot deep channel under the left bank fringed with sharp-edged rushes. They were going at it hammer and tongs, and what a lovely sight it was. I pushed the punt very cautiously upstream and into position. Though he couldn't see a fly on the water or any detail, the reed-fringed channel was familiar to him. I quietly dropped the famous old anchor that I'd helped him make when I was about 10 years old, vividly recalling how we poured the wet concrete into the big empty paint tin as he held the rusty iron ring upright, and that fascinating grey mixture, most delightful and totally unsuspecting trout did their stuff and responded to his 15-yard cast with that ancient, well-worn kingfisher line. A fine fish in the region of 2 pounds moved purposefully over towards the big grey drake artificial mayfly. "He's coming, Dad, get ready." "Strike, Dad." We had a first-class success on our hands. He didn't realise where the fish was, and after it shot under the punt, neither did I. The battle raged as he revelled in the tussle and chatter of the old brass reel. "Where is it, boy? Get the net ready," repeated, and so often I thought it might have a stroke. Well, it came unstuck and went on its way. We both agreed it was a good 6 or 7 pounds, and more than anyone could have coped with. It was a marvellous half-hour, a final farewell to fond memories. Well, I've digressed, I fear. We were walking slowly up to the house, where we were greeted by my mother. I was so pleased to see that she was lucid and active. She was delighted with the thought that we would all be home and together again, and then burst into tears because Dick would not be among the homecoming. This was not helped by my father saying, "What's the woman crying for?" We all had a cup of beanside tea, which was so strong it almost held the spoon upright and required some skillful disposal action. I lit all the fires and heaters that I could find and decided to stroll up to the cemetery and say hello to Dick and give myself a short break for a bit of detached thought. I returned later to find that all the fires had been turned off, including the one in my bedroom, which was the most important, as everything, including the bed, felt damp. The log fire in the enormous sitting room was still glowing, so I rekindled it. After an eventual good night, said I was going to sit up for a bit, and finally crashed out on the huge 8-foot leather settee and spent a very reasonable night under a heavy RAF greatcoat. By now I was beginning to feel in need of courage and support, and was very glad when Joan returned from the Wrens and Geoffrey from Africa, where he'd been mentioned in dispatches for his work on coded radio telecommunications. Everything seemed to brighten up now, and a semblance of order and normality was re-established. Father began to call me by my right name, and even started giving me orders. I did what I could with the dreadfully overgrown garden, but it would never again be as wonderful as it had been under dear old Catlin. I eventually received a letter from the Officers' Services Resettlement Bureau offering me a business training course at Stag House off Victoria Street, SW1. I duly attended and found myself in familiar company. It lasted a week and culminated in a rather useless certificate of membership of the Institute of Industrial Administration, which didn't seem to impress anyone anywhere. The lectures were highly political and strongly biased towards left-wing socialism, causing some mild hilarity, as there was a total lack of any comprehension by the lecturers of the people they were obviously trying to brainwash. They were finally asked to choose between the big company with the enormous power of the trade union behind you, or the small company with its inevitable slave labour treatment. I was shortly interviewed by a small company off Tottenham Court Road, Messrs. Lee and Goodman Displays, and I started work immediately under the watchful eye of the general manager, Mr. F.N. Anderson. The work primarily involved negotiation with publicity managers of well-known companies for the design, construction and installation of exhibition stands and large window displays, mainly in the London area. This firm was one of the leaders in this field and well equipped with design studios and construction facilities. The design studio was headed by a brilliant artist, Harry Sheldon. Harry and his wife Joan later became good friends and fishing companions. I eventually earned quite a reasonable income and served some very fine clients: BOAC, Aer Lingus, British Oil and Cake Mills, Eugene, Coty, Cable and Wireless, etc. I quite enjoyed it for a year or so, when the old call of the wild summoned me in the shape of an unexpected invitation to serve with the Department of Game, Fish and Tsetse Control in Nyassaland, this in East Africa. The requirements were the development of tourist trout fishing in the highland areas and the fish farming for the indigenous population in the lowland areas, with some game control responsibilities. I was able to say farewell and thank you to Messrs. Lee and Goodman Displays, where I had achieved a degree of success and quite enjoyed the work, though in my heart of hearts I knew it wasn't my scene. Within the month I found myself aboard the Edinburgh Castle, bound for Beira, in the late December 1949. I now had those old feelings of enthusiasm and goodwill towards my fellow man, which existed when I had the freedom of the river bank at home all those years ago. The rail journey from Beira to Limby in Nyassaland was a rather tedious and sweltering ordeal. It lasted 2 days through bush country and jungle, with frequent stops to load logs onto the tender to supplement our fuel. The logs were stacked in neat piles at regular intervals alongside the single-track rail. Sometimes we had to dismount and walk in order to help the tired little engine to negotiate steep inclines. What fat I had on me when I left England certainly wasn't on me when we finally arrived at Limby Station in pouring rain, unwashed, on Christmas Eve 1949. The director of the game department was on the station to meet me, and we were quickly on our way to his bungalow at Blantyre, some 10 miles away. The only thing I really recall of that journey was the sight of a nightjar which rose upward in the headlights behind stripes of white rain. For some strange reason, I can't recall anything about Christmas or Boxing Day. I know I was very, very tired, so I'll call it train lag. My next recollections were being briefed on my destination and duties at the game department headquarters in Blantyre. The afternoon was spent purchasing stores and camping equipment from the many excellent Indian stores in Blantyre, clearing up my main luggage and firearms from customs, opening a bank account with the Barclays DC&O, finally purchasing an Austin A40 pickup on an immediate government loan repayable by monthly deductions from my salary of £5. I then recall feeling like something the cat had dragged in at the end of that day. I was due to depart for the northern province the next day, but first had to call in at headquarters to select a guide and interpreter from half a dozen happy-looking locals, which the director had lined up for me. He said they were all rogues and vagabonds and left me to it. I surveyed all those rows of shiny white teeth, and then decided on one man in particular who stood out because of his sheer presence and size, plus some knowledge of English and a tendency to tell the others how to behave on this important occasion. His name was Peter Yatima, a member of the Yao tribe from Fort Johnston on the Sherry River. The Yao tribe had often assisted the Arab slave traders in years long past. He was delighted to tell me that when he was not in casual employment, he spent most of his time fishing and doing what comes naturally in roughly equal proportions. He also had a grubby note purporting to come from some long extinct household extolling his virtues as a cook and houseboy. Well, Peter remained with me through thick and thin during my 13 years of service. He was a good, cheerful and very courageous African. He endowed me with a power and majesty far beyond my station, and was embarrassingly difficult to subdue in the presence of Northern Province tribesmen, whom he considered to be somewhat inferior. He was never rude or violent, but simply maintained a superior detachment, in spite of which he always seemed to be greatly admired by all. It was time to go. We had roughly 400 miles in front of us to a destination called Nyassaland on the slopes of the Nika mountain in the northern province. I gathered that Nyassaland consisted of a derelict 3-room mud, brick and thatch bungalow, which I had to completely renovate. Well, I said farewell, and just as I was moving off, the director told me to have a look at the stream 5,000 foot up on Zomba Mountain Plateau. It's about 40 miles on your route. Be careful, it's a dangerous road up. Well, my blood pressure was beginning to rise, and then it dawned on me it was entirely up to me when I got to my destination. There was no fixed program. I could sleep in the vehicle, or Peter could cook a meal anywhere at any time. I had abundant stores and equipment and plenty of drinking water in canvas bags, utility lamps, paraffin, spare petrol and a full tank. There was no hurry. This was Africa, not King's Cross Station. Well, we reached Zomba in about 45 minutes. This was the capital of the country, the seat of government, a very pretty place, with a fine botanical garden, civil servants' residences dotted about among the foothills, government house, the King's African Rifles barracks and a hospital, and Zomba Mountain towering above it all. We reached the start of the 5,000 foot climb, where we had to wait at a large notice board and clock. The notice board stated that it was only legal to ascend between the hour and quarter past, and a similar notice at the clock at the top advised legal descent between half past and quarter to. It was soon obvious why these instructions had to be rigidly enforced, as it was quite impossible pass any other vehicle on this extremely dangerous track.